Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News, an Indian perspective on All India Radio. This is Pallavi Manchanda and with me is R.S. Raghu, bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. First, the headlines. India envisions itself as a developed country by 2047, says External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar at the event of India at 75 showcasing India-UN partnership. Ministry of External Affairs issued an advisory to warn against fake international job offers. Afghan Defense Minister Mullah Mohammad Yaqub says Afghan Taliban fighters willing to be trained in India. The Afghan Taliban government accuses Pakistan for the cross-border chaos and military tension. Chinese Center for Disease Control necessitates the need for a fourth shot against COVID-19. Canada braces for historic extreme event as Hurricane Fiona hits hard. Oscar awardee US actress Louise Fletcher died at her residence on Saturday. She was 88. In women's cricket, India beat England by 16 runs in the third and final ODI at Lord's. Ace Indian pacer Jhulan Goswami playing her final international match. And a tearful Roger Federer bid adieu to professional tennis with Laver Cup in London. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar on Saturday said that India today envisions itself as a developed country by 2047. He said India is now the fifth biggest economy of the world and is still rising as the strongest and the most argumentative democracy. Speaking at the event India at 75 showcasing India-UN partnership in New York today, Dr. Jaishankar highlighted the importance of digital technology in India's progress. He said digital technology has helped in providing food safety to 80 crore Indians and more than $300 billion worth of benefits have been distributed digitally. He added that India has administered over 2 billion COVID vaccination doses with the help of digital technology. The minister said on the 100 years of independence, India aspires to digitize its most remote villages. Dr. S. Jaishankar said India has also enabled two major initiatives for global climate action. The first is the International Solar Alliance and the second is the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. On the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict, the External Affairs Minister said conflict in Ukraine has aggravated food and energy crisis. He said India has supported several countries by supplying food grains. In today's Hotspots section, we bring you a discussion on India at United Nations today.
77th session of the United Nations General Assembly has begun. As Jaishankar, the Indian External Affairs Minister, would be representing India. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Chinese President Xi Jinping and the Russian President Vladimir Putin would not be attending in person. The theme of the meeting is Watershed Moment, Transformative Solutions to Interlocking Challenges. Ambassador Wadhwa, this session is taking place at quite a challenging moment. The specter of war is hanging in Europe. And the consequent crises like energy and the food are being faced by many countries. How do you think the session would be significant in the near future?
So obviously, dominant theme would be the war in Europe, particularly in Ukraine, and the consequent fallout of this conflict in the rest of the world. Most of the countries in Europe would be using this occasion at the United Nations General Assembly to bring out the issues regarding what they call aggression of Russia vis-a-vis Ukraine. And the rest of the world, of course, is more concerned about more existential issues and the fallout of this conflict. Now, as you know, that the world is not free of other conflicts, but the main issue of the aggression of China, for example, in the South China Sea, on the Indo-Chinese border, and incursions in the Western Pacific, etc., are at the back of minds of people the Taiwan crisis is also at the back of minds of countries. But at the same time, we'll be on the back burner because of the burning issues in Ukraine. And a recurring theme, of course, is the transformation which is taking place in the world because of technological changes and how the world is going to cope with that. The UNGA president has also given a call for the UNGA to tackle these issues, talk about them, and at the same time, he has given priority to UN reform, which makes a very interesting agenda for the 77th UNGA.
Ambassador Wadhwa, Prime Minister Narendra Modi in the past had given 5 S for the World Forum at the United Nations. Samman, Samvad, Sahyog, Shanti, Samriddhi. These 5 S's encompassed the whole philosophy of the Indian Prime Minister in his approach to number of world issues. And when he met the Russian President Vladimir Putin on the sidelines of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, he reiterated the peace aspirations of the world, that the era is no more of war, which has in fact, Ambassador Wadhwa, been stressed by the French President in his address at the UNGA. So how do you think that the 5 S's, the Prime Minister, would be relevant in the current session?
So obviously, India has been pushing for peace and prosperity in the world, and the 5 S's were spelled out in detail earlier with this in mind. Also, the fact that the world is very globalized in today's context, and therefore, unless there is cooperation and coordination amongst all countries of the world, especially at the United Nations, these problems that are facing the world today will be very difficult to solve. And the fact that the Prime Minister mentioned the fact that today is not the time for war is a factual comment. I think the French President and perhaps others from the Western world will also use this in order to browbeat the Russian president, and also to say that even countries like India, for example, which are closely aligned with Russia, do not support this war in Ukraine. So that is to be expected, of course. What the Prime Minister said was in the context of the fact that there are too many problems which are facing the world, and that problems should be concentrated upon rather than trying to solve issues through conflict. So I presume this is something which will be understood by most countries. But of course, the statement can be used by many in a different context, as has been done already by the French president.
Ambassador Wadhwa, EAM Jaishankar would be addressing the UNGA on 24th. And the immediate concerns for India indeed would be countering terrorism. At the same time, we have taken the agenda of reform of the multilateral bodies equally. Besides, climate action is equally a great and grave concern for a number of countries, including India. And also the equitable access to critical pandemic interventions like vaccines and medicines. In countering terrorism, we have seen that China has blocked the designation of a number of terrorists at the UN Forum. So do you think that the United Nations hasn't lived up to the expectations in countering terrorism?
Well, as we know that India has been tabling this resolution on terrorism since 1996 at the UNGA. It enjoys widespread support, but there is no conformity or there is no consensus on the definition of terrorism even today. Obviously, those who are not interested in finding common text are finding that as an excuse, and this state of affairs will continue most likely at this forthcoming UNGA as well. That doesn't stop countries like India from articulating the concerns. In fact, the threat of terrorism is now felt across the globe. Most countries who were left untouched earlier are also facing the brunt of terrorism, and many countries have come together now to bring about a coalition, so to speak, of countries in order to counter terrorist influences, especially cross-border terrorism, which is India's main concern. On the reform of the multilateral system, the climate change action, and also the equitable allocation of resources for pandemic intervention, these are, of course, ongoing themes which have been important for many countries for the past many years. I guess there is a lot of momentum nowadays on climate action because not much has been achieved. Many countries who are taking some action have been stopped dead in their tracks because of lack of finances, and also because of the global situation and the fallout of the Ukraine war, for instance, which has pushed up energy prices, which has created a food insecurity in many countries, especially in Asia and in Africa, and at the same time has brought about difference in attitude towards fossil fuels. and how to reduce them and in what time frame, etc. On the issue of China, I think the China-Pakistan nexus is now quite well known and established, and China does not want to act in any manner which harms its all-weather ally Pakistan. The technical hold that it puts repeatedly on known terrorist offenders is testimony to that. I presume that this action will continue at this UNGA, and perhaps after a while, once Pakistan is satisfied or goes ahead, gives a green signal, then the Chinese will lift that ban. This is a repeated pattern which has been happening. And countries like these need to be called out, which many countries have started to do now. Of course, India has taken the lead in the past, but this was actually a joint proposal by the United States and by India against a mastermind who actually masterminded terrorist attacks in India. And therefore, it is not at all explicable that the Chinese still insist on technical holds while there is widespread evidence against the offender. We always keep saying in the UNGA and otherwise bilateral meetings with other countries that one day this will come back to bite the Chinese themselves. If terrorism raises its head in Xinjiang or in other parts of China, it will then realize that it's making a big mistake by not supporting repeated offenders of terrorism and getting blindsided by what the Pakistanis have to tell the Chinese.
Indeed, Ambassador Wadhwa, one interesting aspect is that while we have been stressing on the expansion of the Security Council of the United Nations, which essentially reflect the Second World War, immediate years of the Second World War, post-war era. And a lot of waters have flown in the rivers, and still we find that the countries are still blocking the efforts to expand the Security Council. Do you think that the United Nations really represent the today's world in democratic manner?
So the world has changed drastically since after the Second World War, when the United Nations systems was formed. At that point in time, it was largely the countries who ended up on the victorious side. And also at that point in time, there were certain countries with a much higher GDP. But today we have a number of countries which have overtaken them. India, for example, has overtaken the United Kingdom. India contributes a lot to the United Nations peacekeeping operations. It is probably going to become the world's largest populous state. Already it is a population of 1.4 billion people, representing more than 1/6 of humanity. It is a major player and has a major voice in all finding solutions to the major problems in the world today. And without countries like India, the other G4 countries like Japan, Germany or Brazil, the United Nations Security Council lacks the representation that it should in today's context. On the other hand, certain countries who do not deserve to be there are still hanging on to their positions in the United Nations Security Council. India is not saying they should not be there, but India is saying that the Security Council should be expanded to include legitimately those who actually deserve to be there. It's only then that it will be able to solve the major problems which confront the world. And by all accounts, India's qualifications are right up there as far as the membership of the UN Security Council is concerned.
Thank you, Ambassador Wadhwa, for sharing your insight with us.
Thank you very much.
This is All India Radio giving you the world news. For quick news updates round the clock, follow us on Twitter handle @AIR News Alerts.
Hundreds of thousands of people are without power as Hurricane Fiona began to batter Canada's Atlantic coast on Saturday. Parts of Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island and New Brunswick are experiencing torrential rains and winds of up to 148 kilometers per hour. The Canadian Hurricane Centre warned ahead of its arrival that Fiona could be a historic extreme event with expected power cuts and flooding. At least 8 people died when Fiona cut through the Caribbean. Tropical storm warnings were issued for the Atlantic provinces of Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, Newfoundland and New Brunswick, as well as in parts of Quebec. The country's eastern region could receive up to 10 inches of rain, increasing the risk of flash flooding. In Nova Scotia, shelters were prepared in Halifax and Cape Breton for people to take cover ahead of the storm. Severe hurricanes in Canada are rare as storms lose their energy once they hit colder waters in the north and become post-tropical instead. But pressure in the region is predicted to be historically low as Hurricane Fiona hits, making way for a heavier storm. Nova Scotia was last battered by a tropical cyclone in 2003 with Hurricane Juan, a Category 2 storm that killed 2 people and heavily damaged structures and vegetation. Meteorologist Bob Robichaud warned on Friday afternoon that Fiona will be bigger than Juan and stronger than 2019's Hurricane Dorian, which also reached the shores of Nova Scotia. The Afghan Taliban government has accused Pakistan of creating chaos and military tension at the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. Attacking Pakistan, the Taliban's commander, General Mubin Khan, blamed Islamabad for deliberately delaying its fruit export at the border. His statement comes a week after deadly violence between Taliban forces and the Pakistan army that reportedly killed 3 Pakistani soldiers. General Khan also said that Pakistan's motive has always been to harm Afghanistan no matter who is in power. Amid rising tension at the border with the Pakistani army, the Taliban official said that Afghanistan does not need the Gwadar or Karachi port owned by a Chinese private firm for trade. He informed that Afghanistan has already signed a deal with Iran to use the Chabahar port. Last year in September, the Taliban had assured that the new Afghanistan government wants a good relationship with India and that they were going to support its role in Chabahar port to boost its trade. Expressing his desire to bolster ties with India, the militant leader also said that Afghanistan's foreign minister should go to India and expose the Pakistan army's role in the terror attacks in India. Calling the Pakistani military force a rentier army, the Taliban official said that the Jaish-e-Mohammed chief and India's most wanted terrorist Masood Azhar is an agent of Pakistan's intelligence agency, the ISI. He further claimed that ISI trained Al-Qaeda terrorist Saifullah Akhtar to fight in Kashmir. General Khan rejected Pakistan's claim of Masood Azhar's presence in Afghanistan and said that Pakistani Foreign Minister Bilawal Bhutto Zardari is making a false statement to undermine relations between India and Pakistan.
Afghan Defence Minister Mullah Mohammad Yaqub, in a recent interview with the Indian media, maintained that the Afghan Taliban will have no issue if their fighters get training in India. Now, this is a very significant and impactful tilt, which implies that the role of ideology, religion and national interest have been put on the back burner by the Taliban and only self-interest and recognition is the prevailing factor. Mullah Muhammad Yaqub is the son of Taliban's founder, the late Mullah Muhammad Umar. Yaqub had a key role in ensuring and strategizing a peaceful takeover of the Taliban last year. Earlier this year, Mullah Muhammad Yaqub called on the ulema of Afghanistan seeking their help in organizing and bringing reforms to the Afghanistan army. Mullah Muhammad Yaqub also advocated for the peace process with the US and establishing cordial bilateral ties with India. Ministry of External Affairs on Saturday issued an advisory to all the Indian citizens not to get entrapped in such fake job offers being floated through social media platforms or other sources. The advisory stated that instances of fake job rackets offering lucrative jobs to entice Indian youths for the posts of digital sales and marketing executives in Thailand by dubious IT firms involved in call center scam and cryptocurrency fraud have been noticed recently by the Indian missions in Bangkok and Myanmar. The scam rackets target IT-skilled youth and dupe them in the name of lucrative data entry jobs in Thailand through social media advertisements as well as by Dubai and India-based agents. The victims are reportedly taken across the border illegally, mostly into Myanmar, and held captive to work under harsh conditions. The advisory also asked Indian nationals before travelling on tourist or visit visa for employment purposes to check or verify credentials of foreign employers through concerned missions abroad and antecedents of recruiting agents as well as any company before taking up any job offer.
Science and Technology Minister Dr. Jitendra Singh has said that sustainable biofuels play a key role in reducing greenhouse emissions from the transport sector. He was addressing the Main Stage Summit event on international collaboration to accelerate the clean energy transition at Pittsburgh in the United States on Saturday. At another side event on India Clean Energy Showcase, Dr. Singh said that India stands at the forefront of addressing the global challenge of climate change. He said India has committed to an ambitious nationally determined contributions of reducing emission intensity by 33 to 35% in 2030 against the levels of the year 2005. The minister said India is among the few countries in the world to design a cooling action plan with a long-term vision that addresses cooling requirements across sectors. Dr. Jitendra Singh is leading a high-level joint Indian ministerial delegation of Ministry of Power, New and Renewable Energy and Ministry of Science and Technology at the Global Clean Energy Action Forum 2022 at Pittsburgh in the United States. Amid the debate on whether China has a COVID-19 exit strategy and tragedies arising out of China's dreaded zero-COVID policy, the Chinese Center for Disease Control and Prevention, China CDC, has confirmed the necessity of a fourth shot against COVID-19 for an exit from the pandemic. In a recent article, China CDC said a well-timed second booster dose is necessary for a safe, long-term exit from the pandemic. Its design and strategy will be based on emerging evidence of the duration of protection afforded by the vaccines. The Chinese state media reported that the country has started clinical research on the second booster shot. So far, there was no policy for a second booster dose in China, even as the country is currently struggling to contain the recurring spikes of the COVID-19 virus in different cities, prompting lockdowns for millions, disrupting the lives and the economy. In past and even more recently, China saw a new wave of anger about China's strict COVID policies as a bus carrying people to quarantine center overturned, killing 27. There were reports of lack of food for people in lockdowns, deaths due to non-availability of medical facilities for non-COVID patients, and misuse of power by public authorities as Chinese people expressed their frustration over the unending and inflexible zero-COVID policy. Many experts have said that with the crucial political season in China expected to last till March 2023, any kind of loosening in the country's zero-COVID strategy should not be expected before the second half of 2023. Authorities, however, need to increase the vaccination among the elderly. They should make the people aware of the repercussions of such a loosening in the policy, which may cause a spike in the COVID cases, causing unbearable pressure on public health infrastructure.
U.S. actress Louise Fletcher, who had won an Oscar in 1976 for her unforgettable role as Nurse Ratched in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, died on Saturday at her residence. She was 88 years old. While she was best known for her portrayal of Nurse Ratched, Fletcher's career spanned 6 decades, including TV and film. Fletcher was relatively unknown when picked to play Nurse Ratched in 1975's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. She began her acting career in the 50s but paused for more than a decade to raise her children. The American Film Institute put Nurse Ratched behind only The Wicked Witch of the West, Darth Vader, Norman Bates, and Hannibal Lecter in its ranking of film's greatest villains. She married producer Jerry Bick in the 1960s before getting divorced in 1977. She is survived by 2 sons, John and Andrew. Former colleagues and fans paid tribute to the actress, calling her an absolute great. The Harmanpreet Kaur-led Indian women's cricket team and England pitched in for a tough match in the third and last ODI of the series at Lord's on Saturday afternoon, 3:30 p.m. IST. India beat England by 16 runs. Earlier, England had won the toss and opted to bowl. Batting first, the Indian team gave a target of 170 runs to England. This match proved to be a swan song for ace pacer Jhulan Goswami, who is retiring from cricket after this match. The 39-year-old fast bowler from West Bengal is among the greatest players India has ever produced. No doubt it will be an emotional moment for Jhulan and her fans.
In cricket, India defeated Australia by 6 wickets in the second T20 International at the Vidarbha Cricket Association Stadium in Nagpur on Friday. Chasing 91 for victory, India overhauled the target with 6 wickets in hand and 4 balls to spare. Rohit Sharma's dazzling 46 helped India to level the 3-match series. Earlier put into bat, Australia scored 90 runs for 5 wickets in 8 overs. Matthew Wade scored 43 of 20 and skipper Aaron Finch contributed 31 of 15 for visitors, while Aksar Patel picked up 2 wickets for the hosts. The match was delayed due to a wet outfield and reduced to 8 overs. Third and final T20 between India and Australia will be played in Hyderabad on Sunday. A tearful Roger Federer waved goodbye to professional tennis after teaming up with fellow great Rafael Nadal at the Laver Cup. The 41-year-old received a long ovation after walking off court for the final time as he retired as a professional. The Swiss, who won 20 Grand Slam titles, is considered one of the best players in tennis history. Getting emotional, he said, "It had been a wonderful day and he was happy, not sad." He said, "It felt great to be here." Federer cried as he hugged Nadal and other players, then took acclaims from thousands of fans who chanted his name at the O2 Arena in London. Nadal also could not hold back the tears. The 36-year-old Spaniard cried as he sat alongside Federer while the pair listened to British singer Ellie Goulding, who rounded off a memorable night with a performance. Federer and Nadal joined forces to play doubles against American pair Jack Sock and Frances Tiafoe in the annual team event between Europe and the rest of the world. Despite Federer not having played competitively for over a year, the veteran duo pushed Sock and Tiafoe before losing 4-6, 7-6, 7-2, 11-9 as Team World levelled at 2-2 at the end of the play on the opening day. Federer and Nadal, affectionately nicknamed Fedal, almost won it. The match brought the former world number one's 25-year professional career to a close after his 1,750th competitive match across singles and doubles. Now let us take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. The New York Times writes that Putin's draft draws resistance in Russia's far-flung regions. Wall Street Journal reports that UK's sweeping tax cuts send pound tumbling, bond yields higher. Washington Post reports that Fiona makes landfall in Canada, leaving hundreds of thousands without power. The Guardian writes that Saudi Foreign Minister defends role in securing Ukraine prisoner swaps. South China Morning Post report says a wild ride powerful storm Fiona hammers Canada's east coast, leaving thousands without power. The Financial Times observes that global stocks fall for second straight week as central banks raise rates. And the Japan Times says Iran's leaders are safe but protests raise the stakes over imposing wheel.
And now we end a look at the headlines once again. India envisions itself as a developed country by 2047, says External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar at the event of India at 75 showcasing India-UN partnership. Ministry of External Affairs issued an advisory to warn against fake international job offers. Afghan Defense Minister Mullah Muhammad Yaqub says Afghan Taliban fighters willing to be trained in India. The Afghan Taliban government accuses Pakistan for the cross-border chaos and military tension. Chinese Center for Disease Control necessitates the need for a fourth shot against COVID-19. Canada braces for historic extreme event as Hurricane Fiona hits hard. Oscar awardee U.S. actress Fletcher died at her residence on Saturday. She was 88. In women's cricket, India beat England by 16 runs in the third and final ODI at Lord's. Ace Indian pacer Jhulan Goswami playing her final international match, and a tearful Roger Federer bid adieu to professional tennis with Laver Cup in London. And now, before we end, let us listen to Mahatma Gandhi's favorite bhajan Vaishnav Jan by artists from Guinea-Bissau on its Independence Day.
Para tu que upakare kare toy anapima nana mere sakala lokman tahune wande nindana kare ke nire achaka chalarake dana dana janani mire wana lobine kapatara iteche kama krode niwaria.
And with that, we end this bulletin. We will be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.